Yeah, so moksha represents the liberation of the soul, so the awakening of the soul. So when you gain more self-awareness, the soul becomes lighter because you have come back to life, and you basically have, I guess you would say, you've purified your energy. In a whole lot of doctrines like Gnostic texts or like ancient texts, this is probably this would be referred to more so like gaining back your virginity, your innocence again. So when you regain your innocence, because you can regain your innocence even if you, because your innocence is based on predicated on the basically your belief on how pure you technically think that you are. But you have to actually genuinely when you think you are a pure being, you will do everything that a pure being will do to maintain that purity. If you purely think that way, if you like genuinely think that, it will manifest. And so therefore the heart will become lighter and more pure, and in the mind, because in the mind believes the soul is pure. So then so forth and so be it. The soul is purified through the mind, and the mind once again represents that balancing of the skills. Soul represents the heart, and the spirit represents that feather. Because the feather, the reason why it's a feather is because the soul, just like a bird, the spirit flies and is very fluid, like a gas, into the spiritual realm and into the physical realm without being so dense. So without it being a solid, so therefore it has no physical boundaries at all. Same as a bird who can enter into the spiritual, the higher density, and still exist within this the physical realm, through his physical being, which is where like you could put it as a bird flying, and then it perches onto a tree whenever it comes to rest or relax or just feast, whenever it comes back down to the ground. So it can enter the skies, which is a higher density, and then it come back to a solid ground, which is a lower density. So that's the lower dimension to higher dimension. So the spirit can enter into higher dimensions and still exist within lower dimensions. So, and your ability to be your truest self, be who you truly think you are, purely who you think you truly are, is 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 being is the same as being balanced in all dimensions and realms, being purely light as a feather, to be exact. It don't go no other way else. It's just like that. I'm not even gonna try to put too much into it because somebody gonna be like, "What the fuck you talking about?" And if I like literally break it down and make it make sense, you still gonna act like you confused. I don't. So go ahead and figure out how that makes sense yourself. If you give a fuck about shit making sense, because I don't. That's gonna take you some critical thinking. I'm not doing that shit for you. For myself, yes, I know how it makes sense, but I don't do a fuck to explain. So anyway, oh yeah, when it come down to it, that's why you have those different aspects of yourself, which is the soul, the mind, the shadow, which is the ego, and then you have the spirit. So those four aspects, and which is why when you study ancient texts like Hinduism and stuff like that, which is where Buddhism came from, or you study the teachings of the Buddha, that's where you get the concepts of the samsara, karma, dharma, and moksha and shit like that. They all come from the same origin, which all were teachings of ancient brothers. Well, actually, ancient ancestors that were dark matter beings as well. And the reason why they're called dark matter beings is because they have the physical manifestation, the physical makeup of the soul. And because they have the physical makeup of the soul, they can harbor a soul because the dark tone that they have is it holds the light of the soul, which is the mind. And the soul requires a mind in order for it to exist and become more aware, because the mind is awareness itself. So in order for it to see itself, it has to have a mind. In order for it to awaken to who it truly is, because awakening is becoming more aware of oneself, etc., etc., etc. Transcension is purifying oneself through transmutation and transformation, etc., etc., to become one's true self. So to become who you truly think you are. So whoever you wish you were or are willing to become, that's who you manifest into. That's who you create yourself into. So that's how you become. That's who you birth into, which is a cycle of samsara, life, death, and rebirth. Rebirth wouldn't exist if death was the end. So time don't exist. No such thing as days, months, seasons, or years. The shit don't make no fucking sense, because if it was the fucking end, that shit would never repeat. Again and again and again. That's why when you, and even though time don't exist, if you started from the concept of Monday to Sunday, if you still believe in time, why the fuck does it always repeat after Sunday? If it was the end. Exactly, because shit don't ever motherfucking end. Shit just transforms, and then it appears to be different because it is different, because the energy changes, the essence of it changes. The essence is the aura, the energy, which is made of the intention, the will, and the desires of that specific cycle, or completely different from the previous one. And you gotta keep shedding, keep transmuting and transforming and alchemizing in order to align with your own energy, so that you never experience a true death, which means so that you never lose your soul and never return again. In other words, not remind yourself of who you truly are, which is what transformation is. In other words, evolution, which is where the word evil comes from, because Eve represents the feminine energy within, okay, and L is representing the God within, which is the soul, the mind, and the spirit, which is short for Elohim, which is the enlightened primordial dark matter being, or soul, full one, like those were the soul who were in their purest essence, primordial beings, which came before the Titans, before the giants, and before the fall of man, which is God in the physical being. All of it is one and the same. It don't matter how that shit work. Like, it doesn't matter how right now, because that would be completely different context to this this whole thing right here, whatever we talk about. I don't want to call it a lecture. I'm just say, like, it'd be completely different from the message right now. So when you go through shadow work, what happens is that it's like clearing up a smudge of darkness for your soul, and then it becomes more light, because you begin to see, when you begin to realize who you truly are. After that, realize yourself, see yourself, right? That's when you have an awakening, and it appears as light. So it's basically the light of your soul coming from its own darkness, reflected from